What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I want to talk to you about an X-Men book that I read. Uncanny X-Men, The Extremists. This is written by Ed Brubaker and drawn by Salvador Larroca, and it collects Uncanny X-Men issue 487 through 491. Unfortunately, I don't think that there is anything about this book that is very good. The artwork by Salvador Larroca does not do anything for me at all. Usually, I like Larroca. If you go back to like the late 90s when he was working on Excalibur, I really liked his artwork there. But here, it feels like he's trying to go for a photorealistic thing, and it's just not doing anything for me. The artwork here left me very cold. I just didn't like it like I've liked some of his art in the past. And the story itself, unfortunately, is not very good either. So basically, the plot of this book is that you've got a militant group of Morlocks. Those are the mutants who live in the tunnels beneath New York City. They have found this book that can tell the future, and they are trying to start a war with humankind, and they are trying to get the attention of Magneto, and they want Magneto to lead them in this war against humankind. Unfortunately, this story does not make any sense because Magneto is treated like he's going to be this big deal in this war against humankind, and at the end of this book, Skids, who is an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., she gives Magneto this book of prophecy, and then she says, hey, this is very important that you get this. The book spoke to me, and it wanted me to give the book to you. We never, ever see this book ever again. This is kind of similar to Destiny's Diaries, which was a plot device slash MacGuffin used in Chris Claremont's Uncanny X-Men and later on in Extreme X-Men in the 2000s. Those were also books that told the future, written by Destiny, who was a member of the Brotherhood of Mutants, and she could see the future. And those books, even though they were not featured throughout all of Extreme X-Men, they were at least important in the events of that series. This prophetic book written by this Morlock named QWERTY, who we've never heard of and will never hear from again, this book is not important. It's given to Magneto. The next time we see Magneto, we don't see this book. This book is not important. Apparently, it's treated like it's a huge deal in this story, but then we never see or hear from it ever again. Also, this story is trying to make you think that Magneto is going to come back and he's going to lead all of the bad mutants against humanity, and he's going to be back in full power, and he's going to once again lead the Brotherhood against humankind. And if you ever believed in Magneto's teachings, then you're in for a good surprise, because he's coming back, and it's going to be a great day for all of us mutants who believe in what Magneto is preaching. That never happens. The next time we see Magneto, he fights the X-Men a little bit, but then he vanishes, and then the next time we see him after that, he joins the X-Men, and then that's basically where he's at now. He's still a member of the X-Men, even in the post-Secret Wars Uncanny X-Men series. So this book trying to make us think that Magneto is going to go back to being a huge villain for the X-Men, no, that doesn't actually happen. So you could say that all of this being planted in this book, that it's okay that those subplots were never followed through, because Storm even mentions that this book contradicts itself all the time. I still think that building an entire storyline around a book that can tell the future and then not paying off on anything that that book said was going to happen, that's just stupid, and it doesn't really make any sense at all. Also, speaking of things that are paid off in this book or set up in this book and then never followed through on, you've got Warpath and Hepzibah. Hepzibah was one of the Starjammers who is stranded on Earth because of the events of Rise and Fall of the Shi'ar Empire, and she and Warpath get into a relationship in this book. And you might think, based on how much screen time these two get in this book, that this is going to be a huge relationship in this series. No. Immediately after this, you get Messiah Complex, and then immediately after that, Hepzibah and Warpath, they're in the Uncanny X-Men series, co-written by Fraction and Brubaker, but they're not really used as much as they're used here. This relationship never ever comes back to play at all in any of the X-Men books. By the time Corsair is brought back to life and he's featured in that Greg Rucka Cyclops book, Hepzibah is back with Corsair, and there's no mention that she was ever with Warpath when Corsair was believed to be dead. Everything that is set up in this book never pays off again. That book that can allegedly tell the future, it never shows up again. The relationship between Warpath and Hepzibah, it never shows up again. Then you've got Skids, who is an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. here. She was a New Mutant type character who was in the X-Factor series in the 80s, and she really hasn't been used that much in the X-Men comics over the years. She showed up a little bit here and there in the 90s. She does not make any sense here at all, because less than a year before this storyline came out, or it was, I guess, just a little bit before a year. Immediately before Rise and Fall of the Shi'ar Empire, you had Peter Milligan's X-Men run ended with Blood of Apocalypse. And in that storyline, Apocalypse is telling all the mutants who are staying at the school, hey, if you want to join me, all you have to do is drink my blood, and then you'll become more powerful. And Skids was one of the mutants saying, screw the X-Men, let's drink Apocalypse's blood, and we'll become his followers. Here, now she's apparently an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and there's no mention that she was trying to follow Apocalypse like less than 2 months ago in comic book time. And then after this story, we never see Agent Skids ever again. The next time we see S.H.I.E.L.D. intersecting with the X-Men, it's when Dazzler is an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. in Bendis' run. He completely ignores Skids, and that's admittedly Bendis' fault and not this book's fault. But again, everything that is set up in this book, none of it pays off, none of it is important at all. It ultimately feels like this entire book was just filler until they could get to Messiah Complex. It's like, okay, Ed Brubaker is ready right now for Messiah Complex, but everyone else still needs a little bit more time, so you need to come up with some filler story that involves the Morlocks, and then we can do Messiah Complex in 5 months. And that's what this feels like. After Messiah Complex, Ed Brubaker and Matt Fraction, they were co-writing Uncanny X-Men a little bit together, and then after, I think, 2 stories that they co-wrote, Ed Brubaker just leaves. And I have a feeling that Brubaker intended to stay on the X-Men longer than what he actually did. I don't know if he just wasn't enjoying it or if he had other jobs that he was more interested in doing, but he didn't stay on X-Men nearly as long as you might have thought that he would when he first started. He did Deadly Genesis, which was a miniseries, then he spent a year on Rise and Fall of the Shi'ar Empire, then he did this story, which was about 5 issues long, I think, and then he did 1 or 2 stories with Matt Fraction. And in those stories he did with Fraction, none of what he sets up here actually come into play. I think that if Brubaker had stayed on the book longer, this book might have felt more important. All the stuff that happens here might have seemed more important because it would have actually been followed up on with later plot devices, I'm assuming. But no, none of the stuff that happens here is important at all. You can very safely skip this story if you're wanting to read a whole bunch of X-Men books from about 10 years ago. You really, really don't need to read The Extremists. Unfortunately, like I said, I don't think there is anything about this book that is redeemable at all. So those are my thoughts on Uncanny X-Men Extremists. I hope that you guys liked this video. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will be doing some other videos throughout the rest of this week, and I'll be doing some more X-Men books in the near future. I think I'm going to be doing the early stories of Mike Carey's X-Men run from before Messiah Complex starting next week. So be on the lookout for those, and in the meantime, I will see you guys in the future. Have a great rest of your day.